Hi, Lily. Great to meet you. Great to talk to you. Before we get started, I do have to tell you that
Yes,
in 2005,
yes.
my wife and we had just had our son, and 6 months after he was born, we took a trip, our first trip without him, sort of the first time away. We went to New York in the spring of 2005 to see you in Steel Magnolias.
Oh, wow.
So that was actually the first time that I'd seen you in something, and it was a tremendous production. It was
Thank
really
you. So
great.
that was really my first that was like my first job out of school. Um yeah, that was my I think that was my very first New York job after graduating school. So I'm so glad you were there.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a great cast, and you did a fantastic and no. So,
Thank you so much. So many wigs. Lots of I think I had like four wigs.
oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. I remember that.
Yeah,
So,
lots of hair
with
changes.
HBO's The Undoing, what was it about the project that sort of attracted you in the first place?
I loved, I was a huge fan of Susanne Bier's. A huge fan of David E. Kelley's, and of course of Nicole's and Hugh. And so I was definitely inclined to do it. I love Bruna Papandrea, who is of Made Up Stories, who's a producer um, on it, and it was like the kind of company that you this is where it's one of those jobs where you're like, oh yeah, I want to work with this group of people. I want to. But then reading it, it was really also talking to Susanna. Sort of, she we had early discussions where she really told me a lot about her plans that I wouldn't
Mhm.
have known, and that really sealed the deal for me.
Excellent. So, when you're looking at your character of Sylvia, how do you approach a character like that? How do you sort of figure out who that person is outside of what's written there on the page?
I'm from New York, but a very different New York than is portrayed in The Undoing. And but I did sort of I went to school. I was a day student at a boarding school. But a lot of the students that I befriended were from the Upper East Side. So I did have some firsthand experience. While it wasn't my experience, and I always sort of felt I definitely felt like an outsider a bit,
Mhm.
but I had spent some time there, so there was a lot of firsthand research that I had already done, and I recognized Sylvia. I think she's someone who is very adept at
Mhm.
functioning in this incredibly. There's so much pressure in the world that she's in, and she's really good at it. But I do think she is also someone who probably is like I wonder about leaving the Upper East Side eventually. I don't think she's I think she wonders about, opening the door and making a left turn once in a while. So yeah, I recognized her.
I noticed, watching you in the show, the character of Sylvia has, I mean, she doesn't have funny dialogue per se, but she has an air of sarcasm or an air of
Mhm.
wit or
Yeah.
not a flippancy, but something along those lines. Is that something that you brought to the character? Is that within your personality? Is that a choice that you made?
Different than I am. Really, she's quite different than I am, I think. But the but her sense of humor, I mean, I don't mean I don't have a sense of humor. I hope I have humor. I can't imagine getting through a moment of the day without one. But I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm glad that you felt that way about her. And that was really something that Susanna and I sort of figured out together and leaned into. And she really gave me a lot of room for that. So a lot of that, like the whole everything in the ballet class, and that was all improv. That wasn't scripted. But I think she is someone who is a little bit of a button presser, a little bit of a boundary pusher. She doesn't go too far, but she takes it like right to the edge. And I think she is someone who feels like if you can't laugh at, you're screwed. So she's gonna, she always does sort of find the find the bits of humor and levity, and I also think it's how she kind of, you know, it's like how she feels alive is to bring that oxygen into the room, not only for other people but really for herself. I think it's a little bit of a survival of a survival technique.
Absolutely. So did you read the original novel? I think it's You Should Have Known.
Yeah, I didn't. Great title. Uh, and I didn't read it. I met the author, and she was so amazing, and it was really great talking to her. And on set, she was there a bit. But I didn't read it only because Susanna early on, I believe in one of our earlier discussions, um, my character was a departure from the novel, so it felt like it wouldn't be one of those things that would necessarily be
Sure.
useful to kind of put in the suitcase before shooting, but I would love to read it now.
Mhm. So one thing that I have read that you've said in the past is that Sylvia is sort of the quote unquote gatekeeper of everybody's secrets.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Tell me what you know what why you say that.
I think she is someone. I'm just going to undo this bow now because there we go. It's falling. It's falling. This is the problem with Zoom. You're like looking in a mirror the whole time. Um, I I think she's one of those people who, everyone's, these people where a lot of people would say that they are their best friend. Like, I think a lot of people would say, well, Sylvia is my closest friend. I tell everything to Sylvia, but it's not mutual. I
Right.
don't think she actually has very many I think her primary relationship is her daughter, her work, and then ultimately Grace. But I think she's like the first, she's on speed dial. She's the first one that everyone goes to with every new bit of gossip. But I think part of why they go to her is because she doesn't give everything away. I think she is a little bit of a vault. And yeah, so I loved playing that person because I know those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And she kept, obviously she had a huge piece of information that Grace would find very interesting about Jonathan's career. But she didn't reveal that until much later, until after the incident happened,
Yeah.
because it was her career first. It would have broken
Her first,
your
and I
client privilege.
Yes, and I also think, it was at the time one of those things that felt to her when she sort of evaluated it, because I mean, of course, I think she struggled in the moment with what am I going to do, but it was
Right.
something that I would call an omission of kindness, that
Mhm.
at the time I think she felt not only was it privileged information, but also I think she believed that it was over, and her assessment, and I'm not judging whether I think that it's right or wrong or what I would have done, but I
Right.
think her assessment was this is not useful information for her to have until things changed and it became a different story. But at the time, she sort of had the information she had and made the best decision that she could make.
Sure. So when we look at the finale, and you're there, obviously in the court, you have Sylvia has an exponentially important role in the finale by sharing that information, so that Grace goes on the stand and sort of throws Jonathan under the bus. Um, but one thing I noticed is, you're observing everyone around you. Do you find as an actress that it's more challenging to be able to carry on a lot under the surface, but keep that sort of poker face? Because you're observing so much in that moment.
Yeah, the silence. I feel this as a viewer too. I think that the silences in film and television, whether watching them or playing them, they're in some ways they're the most compelling parts of storytelling to me. Sort of receiving information, watching people, listening. It's something that I love and that I loved being able to do in this, and it was who she was. She isn't someone who she doesn't give it away. She's someone who's been she's very skilled, both in her career, and also just being someone who has grown up in this particular community, she is not an open book. And so, that kind of observing is something that it's how she moves through the world. I think it's how she, so I loved doing it, and it was, it felt right.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've obviously worked on a lot of big projects before, but tell me what it was like, what the atmosphere was like working on this sort of tense thriller with Nicole Kidman, Donald Sutherland, Noah Jupe, Hugh Grant, and under Susanne Bier, the great Susanne Bier. Tell me what that, that whole set was like.
I, you know, I really mean this so genuinely. It was such a wonderful set, day in, day out. There was not a person, not a moment that darkened. There was not a cloud in the sky of the production. It just felt generous and supportive and focused, but also very free. And I think that really does come down to how Susanna works. And then, Nicole is someone who, the way she walks on set every day with such generosity for everyone, such kindness, such interest, and selflessness, and she too, like Susanna, Nicole is really someone who, she's an amazing, she's a producer. She's holding the whole story, so she's giving one of the great performances, but she's so aware of the storytelling. And I think there's just no better leader than Nicole on a set. She's totally miraculous. And I loved Susanna so much, and I felt a real kindred spirit with both of them. They're women that I felt very seen by, and I feel very grateful to have them in my life now.
Fantastic. So with The Undoing behind you, I'd like to talk a little bit about some future projects of yours, if that's okay.
Please.
So I'm a huge fan of your Misty Day from American Horror Story, Coven, and Apocalypse, of course. Will we see you in American Horror Story in the future?
You will. Yes.
Excellent. I'm not even going to ask you any questions about it because I know you can't answer them, but I'm looking forward to it very much. So,
I am too.
That'll be great.
I'm really excited.
So I also know that you have a new Amazon Prime show called Tell Me Your Secrets coming up.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell our viewers about that?
I'm so excited for people to see this show. And I think, it's very different than The Undoing, although also produced by Bruna Papandrea, the brilliant Bruna Papandrea. And, I think she has such an incredible eye for amazing stories and stories that center around these female characters who we just are so singular, and we haven't, I feel like with Grace, it's like you just haven't seen anyone quite like her she's such an original, compelling, authentic character. And I feel the same way about the role that I play in Tell Me Your Secrets. And I love to watch stories about people who aren't always making great decisions, who are messy, and that there's a big underbelly to their character and to the world that they're in. And this is that. And it's also, like The Undoing, there are so many surprises and twists that I don't think anyone could see coming, but I'm very excited. I loved the theories that the fans had along the way of The Undoing. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited to hear the theories about Tell Me Your Secrets as people watch it.
So how did you react, talking about the theories of The Undoing, how did you react to the theory that, at one point Sylvia was a suspect? It seemed like people were just looking all around for different solutions, and then it seemed, people were talking about Sylvia.
They were, and I understand why they were, and I there were things about that maybe I had been the other woman with Jonathan, and it tracks. It's not
Yep.
the case, it's not the truth, but it tracks. It's not like a crazy theory. The whole story and the world of the story is so, we don't know. You can't trust anyone, and even yourself. So much of what is happening is that even the sort of ground that you think you're on, that's solid and safe, it's so full of cracks, and it's just being blown open. And so that lack of trust every step of the way, it should filter, it should be, it should just hit everyone. So I think it speaks to the show, and also to the way that the audience was watching the show and appreciating the show, and how invested they were in the show, that everyone was dubious. And yeah.
Absolutely. I also had the theory, subscribed to the theory that Sylvia was the unnamed woman in Jonathan's life.
Yes, that's what yeah, that was sort of part of why. Listen, I get it.
Yeah.
She wasn't, but I get why people would have thought that. And I think, but I'm really glad that ultimately the takeaway is that this was a woman who had not slept with her friend's husband, but actually would walk through fire for her friend.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
and I'm glad that that was the ultimate takeaway, that, because we do get burned sometimes, but more often than not, friendships, the good ones, they're really worth fighting for.
Absolutely. Well, Lily, I think that's everything I had for you. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've been a fan of yours, like I said, since 2005 in Steel Magnolias, and
Steel
right on through American
Magnolias.
Horror Story. So thank you so much for the time, and I can't wait to see you and tell me your secrets with
Thank you.
Amy Brenneman, right, is in that too.
Yes,
She's
Amy
fantastic.
Brenneman, and the brilliant Hamish Linklater, and his performance. There's so much I have, but it's bananas. What I've seen of it is just unbelievable. Enrique is it's a great group.
Great. I can't wait to see it. Well, thank you so much, and take care.